Welcome back to Regency Rumors. I'm Kayla, and here on the channel, I make videos about period dramas, history, and historical fiction, and I am in a new setup here because this is my Christmas present from my amazing family. If you're new to the channel, I'm a little YouTuber over here. I've lived in the UK with my wonderful husband, Jordan, and my sweet, crazy Cocker Spaniel, Griffin. I have done for the past 13 years, but I'm currently back in the US over Christmas, and I'm working on being able to, visit more often. So my family here in North Carolina have surprised me by repurposing a room on their property to be an office and a YouTube studio for when I'm here and visiting, and I am flabbergasted and overwhelmed and excited, and I just want to live in this room all the time. And I'm thinking about doing a video about how this room came about and what it looks like, behind the scenes at some point. We live in a tiny apartment in the UK, so my setup is super snug and just, what I can record in my office and our living room. So it feels amazing to have like a studio to go into. I'm still a really small YouTuber, but it means a lot to me that my family believe in me enough to help me have a space where I can work remotely and record my YouTube videos. For now, it's a bit of a basic setup because it's going to take a while to get ready. Flooring has to come in and sound panels and decor and curtains. When I'm here again, hopefully in the spring, we're gonna have it all squared away, and I will make a video about my Regency era inspired YouTube setup. I'm wanting it to have like a cozy 18th century vibe with a modern flair, so I'll do a full video on the transformation once it's all sorted out. But for now, thank you for forgiving lighting and a new setup that I'm working with temporarily. There'll be some videos from this location whilst it's still being sorted that might not sound perfect, or the lighting might not be the best yet. Thank you for your patience while we make this historically inspired, fun, gossipy space to historically yap together in. So this is meant to be a quick, fun video while we're in this transitional phase. So please consider liking, subscribing, hyping, whatever that is, and commenting the period dramas that you're most excited about for 2026. There are so many coming out this year, and I feel like there's not going to be enough time to watch them all, but we are going to try. So quickly, I am just talking about period drama series. Y'all know I've talked about the new Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility ad nauseum on this channel. I have videos on all three of those series coming out and some of the speculation behind them, so I am skipping them for this video. But if you'd like more of a deep dive on them, please do check them out on the channel, and I will link the playlist. First up is Amadeus. So this is scheduled to premiere on Sky Atlantic in December 2025. I'm guessing at some point in the US on either something like HBO or Apple TV in 2026. This is a new TV adaptation of Peter Shaffer's 1979 stage play focused on the rivalry between Mozart and Salieri in Vienna's 18th century music world. This is going to star Will Sharpe as Mozart and Paul Bettany as Salieri. I really like the casting. I think Will Sharpe is a rising star. I was really impressed with him in The White Lotus. I think Paul Bettany has this really specific balance of vulnerability and oddness to his characters. He can play a nice mix of characters who can be authoritative or highly talented, but also slightly unhinged or insecure or self-aware or self-deprecating. I know Wimbledon seems like a dumb example for reference to this, but I do think it's an example of where he's very good at letting you see the cracks under the confidence for some of his characters, which is exactly what makes Salieri interesting rather than just powerful or bitter. And I really hope that I'm saying Salieri? Salieri. 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 Don't come for me. Controversial take, but I think the way that European 18th century shows are made need to be overhauled. I am kind of worried about this series. There's something that can be so samey about that like blue lighting that they make in French court-esque dramas that for whatever reason makes it feel like they're just so drawn out, in my opinion. It's a shame because it's such a visually gorgeous time period to depict with the clothing and the architecture and the decor, but it ends up feeling like a stale set rather than a real historical setting so much of the time, especially with a lot of the films and TV that have come out in like the last 5 years, let's say, that is set in this time period. And there was nothing visually different or exciting about this show based on the trailer. So let's hope that the storyline really shines through. Amadeus already has a hugely beloved play and film from 1984, so there's definitely going to be people who are skeptical about another adaptation, especially if it doesn't offer anything genuinely new. It actually reminds me of when the BBC did a full Les Mis series after the film came out, and audiences were far more attached to the musical version, obviously, and the long-form, more realistic adaptation ended up feeling unnecessary to a lot of people. So I do worry that could happen here, but I'm trying to stay optimistic, and I like the kind of comedic fun tone that they are going with this new series. Next is Young Sherlock. This is exactly what it sounds like. It follows a 19-year-old Sherlock Holmes at Oxford tackling his first mysterious murder case that launches his detective journey. Do we need this? No. Will I watch anything Sherlock related? Yes. This comes after Enola Holmes, which is about the younger sister of Sherlock Holmes on Netflix, and then there has been a new series called Sherlock Holmes and Daughter, I think, about Sherlock finding out he has a daughter who helps him solve crimes, and then the countless Sherlock media we've had over and over and over again. However, I'm a huge Sherlock fan. I even love playing board games and video games around Sherlock Holmes. There's something so Victorian Gothic, dark academia, London, foggish about Sherlock Holmes, and just like Sherlock and Coca-Cola, you can inject this character into my veins any which way it comes. So I'm going to be watching this, but I don't know if I have high hopes. This is led by Hero Fiennes Tiffin with a supporting cast including Colin Firth and Joseph Fiennes. I was expecting this to be more of a CW PBS type deal, to be honest with you, and that's not shade. I just had the assumption, I guess, that it was going to be really fun, but lower budget in the way that Miss Scarlet and the Duke is, which is an amazing show. I love it, but it's not huge budget. But with Joseph Fiennes and Colin Firth and Max Irons being in this, and directed by Guy Ritchie, it's a much bigger production than I was thinking. So yeah, it's being directed by Guy Ritchie, who directed the Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law Sherlock Holmes. I don't think this is meant to be like a prequel to his exact Sherlock Holmes series. I can't imagine that would make sense, but I did love the kind of quirky, fun style of those films, the music and the setting. So I'm down for a series that has really similar vibes, and I'm going to give this show a chance. Next is the Other Miss Bennet, and this is my most anticipated series of 2026. I am so excited for this series. This is exactly the kind of period dramas that I think should be coming out over remakes over and over again. I've mentioned this series a few times in videos, but now we have some stills and a teaser trailer, and it looks like the perfect quintessential BBC romance period drama. If you don't know, Miss Bennet is a spin-off of Pride and Prejudice, and it's focused on the nerdy, overlooked middle sister of the Bennet family, Mary. It's based on the book by Janice Hadlow, and I read it about 2 years ago, and I fell in love with it. I've read many an Austen spinoff, and some of them make you feel like you've stepped back into the world of Austen based on the plot and the dialogue and the setting, but a lot of them can also miss the mark. I think Hadlow's writing is really sophisticated. I feel like she really understands the Bennet sisters, and she wrote a continuation story that really fits Mary's disposition and the pacing and tone of Pride and Prejudice. So it just feels like this is a natural progression into Mary's story. This is a miniseries, which is my favorite thing when they are done right, and it is a full 10 episodes. So we are about to be fed. It stars Ella Broccolari from Call the Midwife and Richard E. Grant and Ruth Jones as Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. I think this is such smart casting, to be honest with you. Richard E. Grant is just so good at giving those sarcastic, quirky performances. He was the father in the Netflix 2020 Persuasion as Anne Elliot's father, which honestly needs no explanation. But I do think he did well in that role. But I think there is so much more of a depth to Grant as a father figure than was shown in that Persuasion. So here, I think he's a better fit for Mr. Bennet because it's definitely a more complex father figure that's a bit sarcastic and eccentric and detached, but still loving. You know, not a narcissistic dad, one that you want to root for, but he is, a bit of an avoidant, introverted toad. To me, Ruth Jones is the perfect Miss Bennet. I'm so excited to see her in different types of roles like this. Most people know her from Gavin and Stacey and her comedic work, but she's actually done a bit of period drama too. So check out her in Little Dorrit and a biopic called Hattie. And I think she's seriously underrated. She's perfect for a role where the woman doesn't tone herself down. She's confident and commanding and funny and full of warmth, but also, maybe a bit dramatic and emotionally manipulative at times. And that's Mrs. Bennet to a T. That over-the-top, overbearing energy that makes Mrs. Bennet so iconic. And Ruth Jones has that in spades, so I think she's going to be amazing. I feel like so many historical romances focus on Elizabeth Bennet types who are confident and sometimes snarky and conventionally beautiful and extroverted and witty, and not enough on women who are introverted and maybe they struggle with anxiety or fitting into society, but are still special and beautiful and worthy of love. As a glasses-wearing, self-proclaimed nerd who is introverted and loves reading a lot of the time, I felt really seen when I was reading this book. It was such a sweet, endearing slow burn romance and story about Mary finding out who she really was and being confident in her skin. And I'm excited to see this as a miniseries. There's no word for when it's coming out in 2026, so I guess we'll have to hold on, but this series could not be coming out sooner for me. And the second it does, I am not going to stop yapping about it. All right, next up is The Artful Dodger Season 2, and I am floored that this show is getting a second season with how many shows, especially smaller budget period dramas, that are getting canceled left and right. I really thought this series was dead on arrival, but I love the fact that Disney Plus recognized this was a slow burn success and decided to invest in a second season, and the trailer looks amazing. The Artful Dodger is a spinoff, so also like Miss Bennet, where a side character from a classic novel, Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, is shipped off to Australia as a pickpocketing criminal and is attempting to turn his life around as a surgeon when he meets the beautiful daughter of the governor, Lady Belle Fox. What I love about The Artful Dodger is that it feels like those yearning, adventurous period dramas from the mid-2000s, the kind that blended romance and humor and drama that's rich, but it doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. I also feel like it takes its time with the plot. One of the complaints that I've had with shows like Bridgerton or The Buccaneers is that sometimes it feels like it needs to lean into the sexiness and relationship drama that shocks you really quickly into the plot. And you're like, these storylines are just wild for the sake of shock value. But with The Artful Dodger, the story's pacing is just so well done, in my opinion. And it's trying to be fun and engaging as a story on its own, but it's not trying to follow certain TV trends, I feel like. The chemistry between Maya Mitchell and Thomas Brodie Sangster is so good. They are so well matched in this. And then David Thewlis as Fagin does what he does best, which is kind of be like a morally ambiguous, dirt-covered swindler. So I feel like this show is perfectly cast. They set this Dickensian story not in London, but in 1850s Australia, which I think makes it feel really refreshing. It's like a familiar genre, but with a new horizon and heat and color that you don't always get in Victorian England. I mean, you don't always get it now, but I really think that it was worth the risk making it in this new setting. Controversial opinion, but with the knowledge that this series has been on thin ice since it came out and will never be a Bridgerton / Gilded Age massive hit, I would much rather them write it in a way that they could wrap it up very cleanly with a second season that, wraps up the main romantic storyline really well, than I would them trying to set up a third season and not getting it. And then we've just got 2 seasons with a dumb cliffhanger to watch over and over again. I am much more likely to watch a period drama that's just a miniseries or has 1 or 2 seasons with a well-developed, well-wrapped-up story than one that tried so hard to get further seasons and then had so much story left to wrap up on because the writers were so focused on trying to get more seasons. I'd totally be up for this just having 2 seasons, but with really strong, really meaningful, fun 2 seasons that pays respect to the audience that got it that second season. Okay, next up is Agatha Christie's 7 Dials. I'm an Agatha Christie fan. Poirot is such a saddie. I want to be Miss Marple. I've seen probably all the Agatha Christie adaptations you can see. With that being said, with so many adaptations, there are some good, some bad, and some ugly. And the amount of Agatha Christie flops that have come out in the last 10 years has been staggering. And I think a lot of us who are fans of hers and the kind of quintessential 40s and 50s grand estate murder mystery style stories are tired of mediocre adaptations that end up being forgettable or change the story so much that it makes no sense why Agatha Christie's name is slapped up on the title in the first place. So I am almost eye-rolling at yet another adaptation, but not quite yet, because this is Netflix's first attempt, I think, at one of her novels. Now, I am no stranger to being critical of Netflix when it's necessary. I've been conflicted over Frankenstein, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and see if they can come out with something that is memorable enough that people will want them to make more. I'm not trying to be mean, but I feel like some of the mid-2000s adaptations were so mediocre that the bar is really low. So hopefully there's only up from here. The tea is that Sarah Phelps's Agatha Christie adaptations have always been really divisive. She wrote several BBC adaptations in the mid-2000s, and I think a big reason people push back is that they didn't just modernize or reinterpret Christie. They fundamentally changed huge plots of her stories. Entire character arcs were rewritten and motivations flipped and endings altered. And sometimes it felt like we were watching something that shared a title with a Christie novel rather than actually being one. And what's strange is that we really don't see this with other female authors in quite the same way, I feel like. Austen and the Brontes have had some very off-the-wall adaptations, but they rarely go so far as to completely change who the characters are or, to dismantle the core plot in the process. With Christie, those changes left a bad taste for a lot of fans because her stories they're puzzles that rely on tone and structure and payoff. When you pull those apart, the whole thing stops working. There was an adaptation a few years ago, Hugh Laurie's Why Didn't They Ask Evans? That felt like such a breath of fresh air. It didn't try and reinvent Christie or make her darker or more relevant or overly edgy. It trusted the story, leaned into the time period, and let the mystery do what Agatha Christie mysteries do best. It was warmly received by audiences. It felt recognizably Christie, and it proved that you don't need to radically alter her work to make it compelling television. It feels like this is more common in mystery novels than other genres to change huge plot points on screen. I find it really weird. And Agatha Christie is the queen of crime. Her stories already stand on their own. You don't need to gut the plot or reshape the characters to justify adapting them. Now, some cultural references and terms that were offensive and harmful at the time that were in her novels, that's another matter. But the adaptations that work best feel less like acts of reinvention and more like homages to the original stories. Writers and directors who clearly love the books and understand the fandom want to honor why these stories have been popular as long as they have. Okay, now with that rant over with, Agatha Christie's Seven Dials is going to be a limited series based on one of Christie's iconic settings, so another English country estate, and it follows Lady Eileen Bundle Brent, played by Mia McKenna Bruce. It also stars Helena Bonham Carter, Martin Freeman, and Corey McIlrest from Queen Charlotte. Visually, it looks great. Am I skeptical still? Yes. But I'm going to try and be open. I haven't read this novel, so I don't have much to comment on that side of things yet. The trailer does look a bit dark and like cool and edgy. I get it. You want something to seem cool. But I felt like sometimes the more they try and make something cool, the more noticeable that is. And then the less people like it. So my hope is that the writing is good enough that people are going to love it. Some other murder mysteries that Netflix have made are Knives Out and Department Q, The Residence, Mindhunter, and they've all been received well. So hopefully Netflix will start making new iconic Agatha Christie adaptations that we'll want to watch over and over again. Next up is The Forsytes. So this has come out in the UK already, so I've already seen it. And I can say that I was pleasantly surprised and I really enjoyed it. It's coming to PBS in March 2026. It was a little salty when it was first announced. Not in like a this shouldn't come out, but more in just kind of a like, why do we need another adaptation? Like, I'd love something else. However, first off, this is more of a prequel, I think, so it's not covering the same stories as the older adaptations. And I feel like some of the more juicy aspects of this family saga that were just mentioned as backstories in the books are played out in the series. So seeing it on screen has been exciting and heartwarming at times and, very yearning core at others. If you haven't been exposed to the Forsyte Saga, it's a Victorian family saga series of books by John Galsworthy about a dynasty of stockbrokers with bunches of money and scandal and lavish houses and beautiful clothing, all things we love in period dramas. There was a hugely popular 2002 ITV adaptation with Damian Lewis and Rupert Graves and Ioan Griffiths as a widely praised series for its rich period detail and production value, and it had really strong ratings and critical approval. So unlike the 2002 version, which largely stuck to Galsworthy's narrative and tone, the new series leans into a reinterpretation that expands the world and places women more front and center in the narrative and isn't a straight adaptation of the novels. Look, this adaptation isn't like groundbreaking. There's nothing overly unique about it where I'm blown away, but neither is it disappointing or cheesy or watered down. There were a few against the odd love stories, and I love that they didn't shy away from that. It made it all the more tantalizing and made me want to root for some of the young people in further seasons. Is this going to be the next Gilded Age or Downton Abbey? No, but I definitely see it getting further seasons and making people interested in the books again. I'm liking this small surge in period dramas that feels like mid-2000s, like The Heartacres, All Creatures Great and Small, that are complex and intriguing and heartwarming, but with updated production values and way clearer filming than we had 20 years ago. It's kind of why I'm excited about a new Pride and Prejudice series as opposed to a film. You would think with all of the resources and the budget that they are putting into this new series that it will at least be the most visually complex Jane Austen series that we've had yet. So lastly, Miss Austen Season 2. So I don't actually know if this is coming out in 2026 yet, but it has just been announced that Miss Austen has been renewed for a Season 2. And I truly did not see this coming. I genuinely thought that this show was a one-and-done miniseries because it felt so firmly rooted in Jane Austen's death and in the aftermath of how her sister Cassandra dealt with losing her. Like, where else do you go from there, right? Apparently, I was very wrong because it turns out the Austen family had plenty of scandal and intrigue and love stories beyond Jane Austen's novels. So the author of the original book, Jill Hornby, actually wrote another standalone novel called, it might be nonfiction. Anyways, it's called The Elopement, and it looks like what they're now doing is turning this into a sequel, likely because of how well the first season of Miss Austen was received. Miss Austen is a 4-episode historical drama on the BBC and Masterpiece Theatre based on Jill Hornby's book. It stars Keeley Hawes as Cassandra Austen, Jane Austen's older sister, and the story centers on Cassandra in the aftermath of Jane's death, as she's forced to decide what to do with her sister's very private letters. The series reimagines Cassandra's quest to recover and destroy those letters that could potentially tarnish Jane's reputation. And it weaves this quiet mystery through her older life and, intercutting it with flashbacks to the sisters' youth. It's really heartwarming and all about sisterly love, and I just loved this series. Christine Langan from Bonnie Productions, who's involved in the show, said, "The Elopement is drawn from very rich family history. The Austens were very fertile. There's a lot of them. This is a well-researched true story that happens later on around the 1820s and to a wing of the family that involves Cassandra." Miss Austen got really strong reviews from both audiences and critics. For me personally, it did such a good job of not romanticizing Jane Austen as this tragic, lonely spinster, but instead portrayed her as someone who had a full life as a writer and a sister and a friend. So I'm very on board for this next story and for wherever it takes Cassandra. I think Keeley Hawes was such a lovely choice for this casting, and I will watch literally anything she and Matthew McFadden are in. They are Mr. and Mrs. Perry drama as far as I'm concerned. I would love to see the two of them in a romantic period drama, but I don't think that will ever happen. But I would watch. I'll be a little sad that Miss Austen season 2 doesn't directly involve Jane, but I also think that stories about her family still somehow make me feel like I'm learning more about her and her life with the wider context of the people who loved her. So because of that, I am genuinely excited for season 2 of Miss Austen, and hopefully it'll be out in maybe late 2026. Well, that is it for me right now. Of course, I'm also looking forward to Bridgerton season 4 that's coming out in 2026. That's like one of those huge obvious shows that, of course, I'll be tuning into. I will say that for the rollout of season 4, it has been so quiet compared to season 3, which the promotion of that season was unhinged, honestly. I'm not a drama channel, but I would love to do a video around like PR relationships through media history and how we've gotten to this point of pushing actors to basically pretend to be married on press tours, and how it's so weird of us in society that we like this sort of thing. I felt like I had this insane whiplash from that world tour, and poor Nicola Coughlan and Luke Newton, they were put through it with a million press events and like having to do suggestive games and like touching each other's arms, and they filmed him meeting her mother for the first time. That was so OTT. The whole press tour was insane and honestly unnecessary, and I'm not sure why they felt like they needed to do that and have them go through that and kind of pretend like they were single and into each other during this tour. Like, it was so messy. And I know Bridgerton is supposed to be a fantastical, like romantic, fun, colorful show. And I love that the cast are encouraged to be laid back and playful in interviews. But I feel like as rising, popular professionals, especially Nicola Coughlan, she shouldn't have been encouraged to have to do that. And they took a trip to Verona, and all these couples were renewing vows or like getting engaged in front of them. Like, it was so messy. And I am not saying that these two people are not friends in real life. I just mean that this happens a lot on press tours, and we've seen it over and over again, especially in the last 5 years. But obviously there was a heyday as well where couples back in like the golden era of cinema used to have to do this and pretend to be in relationships and stuff like that. And so I feel like it would be really fun to explore a video talking about that and kind of weave in that season of Bridgerton and that whole world tour and like how PR couples have come about. So if you'd be interested in something like that, let me know. I know it's not my typical content, but yeah, I was kind of invested in season 3, maybe a little bit too much. So we have got a very busy period drama year for 2026. What period dramas are you excited about coming out in 2026? I really thought Shogun was also going to come out this year because a new season was confirmed like pretty much as soon as the first season ended, and that's been a couple of years. But apparently they aren't filming till January 2026. So it's going to be a while. I am sure that there are going to be other series coming out this year that just haven't been announced yet. Sometimes, especially with platforms like the BBC, it comes out of nowhere. But I am excited about what we're already getting. There's like a smorgasbord of period dramas. I can't handle it. There's also a load of films like Wuthering Heights and The Death of Robin Hood coming out that I am more excited to rage watch than anything else. So yeah, we've got a busy period drama year for 2026. Oh my gosh. I wish I could spend all my time like watching all the period dramas and talking about them here. So maybe, if you like and subscribe, maybe we'll be able to. Okay, goodbye.